It was an ordinary day in the Thompson household, one that Sarah had expected would end just like the others, full of work, chores, and an evening routine that centered around her one-year-old daughter, Lily. The soft hum of the dishwasher filled the background of the kitchen as Sarah wiped down the counters, her mind preoccupied with the long list of tasks she had to complete. Lily had been fussy all morning, as she often was when teething. Her cries were a dull thrum in the background of Sarah's day. Today, something felt different. She couldn't shake the uneasy feeling gnawing at her. Sarah brushed it aside as typical motherhood anxiety and carried on with her chores. At least today, she had help. Ben, her husband, was coming home early from his business trip, which meant she would have a little break. She couldn't wait for the quiet, for the much-needed time to recharge. By the time Ben arrived home, Sarah had already finished most of the housework and Lily was napping peacefully in her crib. Sarah kissed her daughter's forehead, admiring the sweet, innocent face she loved so dearly. "I'll be back in a bit, sweetheart," she whispered, then left the nursery, closing the door behind her. Ben was in the living room, unpacking his suitcase. Sarah smiled tiredly and took a seat beside him on the couch, resting her head on his shoulder. "Thank you for coming home early. I really needed the break," she admitted. Ben chuckled, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "I can't wait to see Lily. I missed you both," he said, looking up with a grin. But as he spoke, something shifted in the air, like the tension of a storm gathering on the horizon. Sarah didn't know it yet, but the world was about to change. It started with a soft, urgent scratching at the door, followed by an insistent series of barks. Sarah, confused, looked up at Ben. "Is someone at the door?" she asked, getting up to investigate. Ben stood as well, both of them glancing at the front door, puzzled by the unusual sounds. When Sarah opened it, she saw Milo, their beloved golden retriever mix. But it wasn't just Milo at the door. Clutched gently in his mouth was a bundle wrapped in a soft, pink blanket. "Lily?" Sarah gasped, her breath catching in her throat as she recognized the unmistakable soft pink blanket they had bought for their daughter. But it couldn't be. Milo's fur was matted, his tail wagging cautiously as he looked up at Sarah with soulful eyes. He dropped the blanket at her feet and stepped back, waiting. Sarah knelt down, trembling as she pulled back the blanket. Beneath it lay her daughter, motionless. Her small face was pale, her body still. Sarah's heart dropped into her stomach as she gently scooped Lily up into her arms. "Oh my God," she whispered, her hands shaking uncontrollably. "What happened? How did she?" Ben rushed to her side, his face pale with terror. He took Lily from her arms, examining her quickly, trying to assess the situation. "She's breathing," he said, his voice tight with panic. "We need to get her to the hospital." Without a second thought, Sarah grabbed her purse, and the two of them rushed outside, leaving Milo standing in the doorway, his eyes never leaving them. It didn't take long for them to get into the car. The drive to the hospital was a blur, with Sarah's mind racing, questioning how and why Milo had brought their baby back. She couldn't understand it. How had Lily gotten outside? How had Milo found her? The questions tumbled over one another, but she couldn't focus on anything except getting Lily to the hospital. Milo trotted loyally behind the car, his paws quick and steady as he followed them through the streets, his chest heaving with exertion. No one had noticed, but Milo wasn't far behind. At the hospital, chaos erupted as Sarah burst through the doors with Ben following closely behind. Medical staff quickly swarmed them, rushing Lily into a nearby examination room. Sarah stood frozen, her body shaking as the doctors worked. "Please," she whispered, clinging to Ben's arm, "she's going to be okay, right?" "She has to be." Ben didn't answer. He didn't need to. His eyes were wide with worry as they both watched the medical team work furiously to stabilize their daughter. After what seemed like an eternity, a nurse turned to them. "She's alive," she said, her face still a mask of professionalism. "But we need to run some tests." Minutes felt like hours as Sarah paced anxiously in the waiting room, her mind racing with fear. She tried to remember how Lily had gotten outside, but there was nothing except Milo's sudden reappearance at the door. The more she thought about it, the more confused she became. What was happening? How had Milo known? Just then, the door to the waiting room opened, and a nurse stepped inside. "You're going to want to see this," she said, her voice quiet. Sarah and Ben exchanged a look before following the nurse down the hall. They entered a small office where the nurse had pulled up a set of security footage on the monitor. What they saw on the screen was nothing short of miraculous. Milo, their dog, had entered the hospital through the back door, looking around as though he knew exactly where he was going. He walked past several hallways, his eyes scanning the area, then paused at a door before entering the emergency room. The footage was grainy, but it was clear, Milo walked in with purpose. He sniffed the air, then dropped the blanket containing Lily in front of the nurses, who quickly rushed to the baby. The dog then stood back, his tail wagging nervously as he watched them. This is impossible, Sarah whispered. How did he know? The nurse, her expression solemn, nodded. We've seen strange things here before, but this is something else. Your dog, Milo, somehow knew Lily needed help. He brought her here. Hours later, after Lily had been stabilized and thoroughly checked, Sarah and Ben sat quietly by her bedside. The miracle of the moment had begun to settle in, but there were still so many questions. Milo, meanwhile, sat at the foot of the bed, his eyes watching over the family. He had not left their side. You know, the nurse had said earlier, this isn't the first time something like this has happened. We've had animals come through these doors with a strange sense of knowing. Maybe it's instinct, maybe it's something more. But I believe your dog truly saved your daughter's life. As the days passed, Sarah and Ben slowly returned to a sense of normalcy. They could never fully explain what had happened that day. Was it some kind of sixth sense Milo had? Or was it simply a fluke? No one knew. But they did know one thing for sure, their dog had done the impossible. A week later, the Thompsons took Milo to the park, as if to say thank you for the miracle he had given them. Milo bounded through the grass, his tail wagging, his joy infectious. Lily, now healthy and happy, giggled in Sarah's arms as the dog ran circles around them. As they watched him, Sarah smiled softly to herself, a deep sense of gratitude washing over her. It wasn't just the miracle of Lily's survival that she would remember. It was the unwavering loyalty of a dog, the kind of loyalty that had led him to do the unthinkable, to bring their baby back when she needed him most. I don't know how you did it, Milo, Sarah whispered as the dog trotted up to her. She bent down, ruffling his fur. But thank you. And for the first time in a long while, Sarah didn't have any more questions. She just had gratitude for her family, for the dog who had saved them, and for the miraculous events that had brought them closer together.